Good morning and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of Down and Dirty with Sharona. This is a new podcast that we rolled out. Was it just this week or was it last week? I don't know, you guys. The days just seem to run together anymore. But this is episode 2. And this podcast is just me and you chit-chatting and spending the day's news, talking about some things that roll across my news feed that I think are important to discuss. And with the elections being really so important this year, they're always important, but there's an urgency to this election that I think we haven't seen, perhaps since there are a lot of analogies, people making analogies to, back to the 60s, 70s, and some other generations. But there's definitely an urgency. I feel an urgency with this election that I haven't felt in a while. And so we're talking a lot about the elections. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been reported on in regard to what takes place at Donald Trump's rallies. We'll talk about Meg Whitman, a big news for Hillary Clinton there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Baylor situation and what's going on with that university. News coming out this past week about another football player in trouble, was charged with felony stalking. And on the regular podcast, we try to make it a point not to make it about, it's not about Sharona, it's about the topics, it's about the guests. But on this particular podcast, I kind of feel free to share a little bit more with you about my own personal experiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about stalking and what, the residual effects of that, because as you guys know, I've talked to you about what it's like, a little bit about what it's like living with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I've got, unfortunately, a fairly long and lengthy history with stalking, so I feel like I can shed a little bit of light on that particular topic. So let's go ahead and get started. We're only going to go 30 minutes. It's kind of a quickie type deal with with this podcast. We're not going to go on the regular podcast. We'll go an hour and a half, 2 hours. Tomorrow, by the way, we're going to go 2 hours. We've got a great lineup. We're going to talk some fantasy football. We're going to talk elections. And in a more general sense, we're going to talk about our political system in general. I sat down with a good friend of mine. His name is Matt Wood. I'm so excited for you guys to hear that conversation. That's going to, by the way, we're going to turn that into a series, and we're going to delve more deeply into some of the topics that we talked about last night. But it's great. We started that conversation talking about labels. What does it mean? What does Republican or Democrat even mean anymore? What do labels like liberal and conservative even mean anymore? So I'm excited for that. But on this particular podcast, we're only going to go 30 or 45 minutes. It was interesting to see the Donald Trump's had a very interesting couple of weeks, right, since the Democratic convention, and it was so well done. I identify as an independent. I typically vote Democratic simply because I don't know, what does the Republican Party stand for anymore? It just seems to have been co-opted by hatred and misogyny and racism and so many things that I just can't identify with. And I think if anything positive for the Republicans can come out of this election cycle, hopefully it's that the people who want that party to be better will come forward and make sure that it is, because what does it have to offer me as an independent, as a woman who is concerned with equality, who is concerned with protecting our civil rights, with protecting the ideals upon which this nation was founded. And that party doesn't seem to be, it's cliche-ish, I suppose, but it's no longer the party of Abe Lincoln, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy to me. So I was watching, the Meg Whitman thing, by the way, was so huge. Meg Whitman, CEO of Hewlett Packard, and a mover and shaker in GOP politics, came forward. She's one of just many big names in the GOP, in the Republican Party, who has come forward denouncing Donald Trump. And she came out yesterday and said not only was she going to support Hillary Clinton, but she was going to raise money for her, donate money to her campaign, and that is huge. She is a huge moneymaker for the GOP, and that she would do that, and she is a, I would have said before this week, a diehard Republican. You know, someone, I mean, she's devoted to the Republican cause, and for her to do this is extraordinary. And she's just one. There are others, but you know, that one stuck out for me because, you know, I've watched her for years, and then I watched women in the Republican Party, and I can't help but think, why are you there? You know, what I know that you're loyal to the party, but what does the Republican Party have to offer a woman right now? I really wish some of the women who are, you know, associated with the GOP and, you know, like Meg Whitman would address this. And, you know, speak to me. Tell me what the Republican Party offers me. I don't see anything there that offers anything of any value to me. So, you know, this was a big move. I can't overstate what a big move it was for her to do this. And, you know, it's interesting. We're seeing, you know, a lot of big names denounce what some of the things that Trump has said. I mean, he has gone after everyone. And you know, I said on Twitter a few days ago, you know, he kicked a mom and her baby out of his rally. You know, he's gone after the military moms and dads. That's, you know, quite infamous right now. But, you know, you're seeing some of these leaders denounce some of the things that he's saying, but they're not denouncing him. And if you don't denounce him, his particular brand of awfulness is going to be forever associated with your party. Is that what you want your party to be? I mean, really? Is that what you want your party to be? I don't know. You know, it's kind of crazy. Hillary Clinton is, you know, I mean, we know what Donald Trump is. He's certainly not afraid to show us, you know, what he is. And on the flip side, I see, you know, Hillary Clinton being not for, you know, some of the things that her husband did. Bill was unfaithful. Bill, you know, has his own warts. There's no doubt, you know, that she, you know, chose to remain in that marriage, in that relationship. Really is none of our business. All relationships have, you know, have issues. Men cheat. Some women cheat. It's not uncommon if you look at the numbers. It's, you know, it's definitely a thing. Yet we have an unrepented, misogynistic bigot who knows nothing about what this country stands for, knows nothing about what the Constitution contains, knows very little, if anything, about how our government is supposed to work. He is a Republican nominee for president, and we're worried that the nomination is going to be close. I mean, in the year of our Lord, 2016, I cannot believe this is my America. I can't. It's amazing to me. So Clint Eastwood, a guy an old white guy who likes to occasionally shed his thoughts, give us his thoughts on things. Very, very famously, the empty chair thing from the elections that brought us Barack Obama. You know, it's interesting. We do seem to be living in a time where people are unafraid to express their misogyny, their racism, their discriminatory attitudes, and I have mixed emotions about that. On the one hand, it's very troubling to see. It's troubling to watch that Trump rally video and hear all the misogyny and the racism and just the general awfulness of the Trumpeteers, the Trumpet, whatever you want to call them, Trumpites, the people who support Donald Trump, and they're awful people. I mean, they're awful, awful people. And I was talking to Matt last night. I was like, Matt, I know that there are people like that in this country, and I live in the South, which is notorious for being racist. But I know people who have racist beliefs. I do, but I don't know any of those people. I mean, those people are so far to the fringe. I mean, I want to say fringe, but are they fringe? I don't know. But I'm watching this video and I'm like, this is kind of a double-edged sword for me because, it's awful to watch it, but wouldn't you rather know? I mean, I guess you would rather know that Clint Eastwood is who he is, even though, I added him to the list of, because I don't, I mean, Clint Eastwood was someone that, I grew up watching, and I want to know that he's got these misogynistic or, racist attitudes in him. But, I guess we do. We know that now, and so, but I added him to the list of celebrities that I wish had never spoken up because it's kind of depressing to hear what some people have to say, and I added Tyrese to that list a few years ago because I had to unfollow him on Twitter because it was just too much for me. I just couldn't deal with it. So, and by the way, I saw a story this morning. Terrence Howard, I see, is in the news again. It's kind of amazing to me that Terrence Howard almost got fired from Empire. He is a guy who's got a long history of alleged violence against women and domestic abuse, and he's still out there. If he's still out there getting gigs, and Hollywood seems to be very not just Hollywood, a lot of different professions seem to be very forgiving of men who commit those acts. And it's like it's kind of funny, not funny, haha, but ironic funny that women are just forced to accept that. I mean, we see guys like Terrence Howard out here, just to use him as an example. There's certainly many, 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 many more, but we see guys like him out here flourishing and continuing to get gigs, and it's like, it can't help but send a message to us that the abuse and the pain and the scars that we bear from these things means so little. It means so little, and we've talked about that on this show in regard to to sports, in particular. It used to be that these things were swept under the rug. The Ray Rice video changed so many attitudes on that. You really kind of got to see what it's like, to have someone ball up their fist and hit you and knock you, knock you out, and the the just the physical aspect of that and how it looks is probably impossible for a lot of people to understand, how it feels, but you certainly got a look at what it's all about. And I was reminded, as I saw, this is a good way to segue into Baylor and what's going on with Baylor. I read the Baylor story, and we tweeted that out before the show started. I read the Baylor story, and it was so familiar. It brought back so many memories for me, because the circumstances in that story, I lived that for. Imagine living in fear and never knowing when someone's going to show up, when they're going to try to break down the door and force their way into your home, where if they're going to show up if you're out with friends, if you're out on a date. All of these things have happened to me. And, but imagine that instance, the Baylor instance. Imagine that happening over and over and over again, and what that can do to you. And that's what many women experience when you're talking about stalking. It's not, generally speaking, it's not an isolated event. It's not an isolated instance. It is an ongoing thing. And imagine having to live like that for 10 or 15 years, and what that can do to you. And that's what I experienced. That is exactly what I experienced. And stalking and abuse they go hand in hand. They're basically almost inseparable. If you've got someone who's stalking you, and let's make this clear, stalking and abuse are certainly not isolated to women. Men experience this as well. And if you're a man listening out there and you've experienced that, I would love to talk to you. I mean, I know that it happens to you too. It's just that it does. The numbers do indicate that it is more common for women, and for women, it does carry a lot of times. It does carry with it the disparate physical characteristics that we share. I'm a petite woman, 5'4", roughly 5'4", and imagine me trying to compete physically, protect myself physically against someone who's 6'4", 6'5", 6'3", and how outweighed, so to speak, I might be in that circumstance. And stalking is it is a situation where the cumulative effect of it can really do some damage. And I really I read this and I was like, my heart really went out to this young woman, and I was like, I'm so glad that she had a professor who was willing to go to bat for her, who was willing to protect her, help protect her, and to call the police. And and the police were actually willing to take action here, because it is a very, very scary situation, not to, not to just be able to go about, just to live your life, go about regular activities. You know, again, go out with your friends, go out on a date. Imagine going out on a date and having your ex show up and cause a scene. Not only is it, or show up at your job, and cause a scene. I mean, it's humiliating, it's frightening, and you get to the point where you're like, when is it, you don't know when it's going to happen again, and so it tends to make you kind of isolate yourself, and it also makes you, you don't want to, it makes it harder for you really to open up to other people because, you're dealing with this situation, and, a lot of people don't know how to handle that. And a lot of, imagine being a woman going out on a date with a guy. This has happened to me. And your ex showing up and creating a scene, and, maybe there's, some, physical actions associated with that. This dude's not going to want to go out with you again. I can promise you. The vast majority of men aren't going to put up with that. And so it becomes a situation where you're like, well, I don't really want to talk about this. And you don't want to talk about it because for so long we didn't talk about it, and people don't understand, what it's like to go through that. But it's an awful, awful thing. It is definitely something that leaves scars, and we've got to do something to to make things like this far less common, to make stalking far less common, to make abuse far less common, to to make it safer and better for women, because her story is certainly not an unusual one. It happens far too often, and it's far more common. I suspect a woman who's gone through this, who's been stalked, who probably doesn't want to talk about it because it's hard. It's hard to talk about it. But we're going to start talking about these things here because it's important. All right, so we're going to end up with, because we talk about social media on this show, and harassment and abuse and the things associated with that. So I ran a Twitter poll a few days ago because, we talked about Milo, and kudos to Twitter for banning that douche, making the Twitter highways a little bit safer for users, for consumption. So I ran a Twitter poll, and I was like, okay, so would you be willing to pay like a nominal fee for the use of Twitter if they would, monitor the community a little bit better and deal with instances of targeted abuse? And that's what Milo did. This guy did. It wasn't, I suppose you might call him a super troll, so to speak. But he would go out and target women. It was primarily women, and he and his little minions targeted Leslie Jones in an incident that was incredibly difficult to watch go down on Twitter. And kudos for her for being so strong to come out on the other side of that, and it seems like she's doing pretty well. But so I asked if people would be willing to do that, and overwhelmingly most people were very much against, paying for Twitter as a service. And I still don't know where. I'm like, I don't want to pay. Nobody wants to pay, right? Free's good. But I think, I might pay a nominal fee if Twitter would. Yeah, but here's the thing. Twitter and all of these social media because all these social media apps, websites, what have you. I mean, they're all looking for the latest and newest and everything. Things that I would venture to say the vast majority of their users didn't ask for and don't want, don't care about. They're constantly doing those things, and so you know I don't know. It's like I just want to say, just offer a good product. It doesn't have to, I mean, Twitter moments. I don't use Twitter moments. I've never used that. I don't care about it. I really don't. And Twitter doesn't have to tell me what happened while I was away. I was away for a reason. If I wanted to know what happened while I was away, I'll check my feed or I'll check my list. I make a lot of use of Twitter lists, which helps if you live a busy lifestyle and you want to get out here and not be glued to your phone or your computer or your tablet or whatever, create a Twitter list. You can come back and there it is, and you see what people were talking about while you were gone. But they do all of these things that are really, to me, unnecessary. And but I think that I probably would, like maybe 99 cents. I don't know, something very, very, very nominal. I might consider doing it if, in fact, they monitor the community and continue to get rid of super trolls like this guy who was into targeted harassment, was into targeted abuse. So I don't know. What do you think? Let me know. You can shout at me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. We'll maybe follow up with this next week. We'll be back with probably two Down and Dirty podcasts next week. That's it for today. That's all the topics that I had on my list to address for today, because we're going to do a big show tomorrow. We got 2 hours for the podcast tomorrow, Bat Talk with Sharona. We're going to be talking fantasy football. We'll talk about the elections. We'll talk about some other things. If there's any topic that you want me to address, or a guest that you want me to try to get on the show, shout at me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. So thanks for listening. We'll be posting a link to tomorrow's podcast. I haven't set that up yet. I wanted to wait until we got through with today's podcast. So we'll be back next week with another Down and Dirty episode 3. Tune in to Bat Talk with Sharona tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock a.m. And if you missed it last night, Going for Two with Zach and Sharona, we had the super fantastic, the super awesome Bob Harris, football diehard, on the show. It was so much fun. I have bad music taste. It's all right. Hopefully some of my other tapes were better, but check that out. It was a lot of fun, and shout out to him for coming on that show. Happy Hump Day. It is Thursday, isn't it? Last night was Wednesday. I'm so confused. I have no idea what day it is. Happy Thursday. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk tomorrow.